Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to see you all, and thanks for everybody for coming. My sort of background is I'm a very keen bass angler and have been for a long time. I started fishing in the late 80s in Cornwall, and I fished most of my time in Cornwall, but also sometimes in Ireland and in Guernsey, in fact. So that's my fishing side of it. In my work, I was a scientist in the health service. I worked in the pathology service in the local hospital in Truro. That was my second choice. My first choice was to be a marine biologist. But at the time when I was thinking about what career choice to make, there just didn't seem to be the jobs in marine biology. So I went into the health service, which paid me to train and gave me a very good career. But I've always kept that interest in marine biology going. And as a result of that, we formed the science group within BAS several years ago now. So that's where I'm coming from with this. And today is just fantastic for me. It's just awesome to hear all these talks from the latest authorities on BAS, and to give anglers the chance to showcase their input, how they can help to produce and develop the BAS management agenda it's brilliant. So having heard all this information about the latest in BAS science, we wanted to ask you to share your ideas and insights and thoughts about who, how and where are we monitoring BAS, and how can this be improved. So just good, yeah. So why should we monitor BAS? The first thing to say is that most anglers keep records anyway, quite detailed records. I mean, I've kept records for donkey's years. They keep records of when they're fishing, where they're fishing. Those are kept secret, mind you. What the conditions at the time, what the tide was doing, etc. And the idea behind that is to improve your catches, to make your fishing more consistent. But those are all personal records. They're not necessarily part of any wider scheme. The second thing is, what we all want is an abundant and healthy bass stock, which not only we can enjoy, but also our children can enjoy, and their children as well. And I think most anglers would agree that we're pretty far from that situation at the moment, and we haven't got a healthy bass stock or an abundant bass stock. So how do we go about changing it? Well, we change it by anglers having an input into providing data. And providing data and evidence are absolutely key to bringing about changes. If we want changes to the bass management system, then providing that data is absolutely key. We heard this morning from numerous examples. Tom was saying about the boundaries of bass nursery areas. His research showed that perhaps in some cases they're not adequate. Joe was showing about the timings of spawning being outside the current closure period. And it's information like that which is very hard for the authorities to ignore. So it really is important that we as anglers get involved and start trying to provide that. Don't leave it to somebody else, but get involved yourself. So the main aims of the workshop, so we're going to do it in two parts. Part one, to map the current landscape in bass monitoring, data collection, catches. So what's happening, how's this being done, and what the issues and barriers are. And then we'll have a break, and then part two, trying to bring all these activities together, improve the processes, overcome the barriers, so that we can support an increased collaboration between anglers and scientists. And that's what's really important to me, is to get this collaboration between us, to provide the data and evidence that will improve the management of the bass fishery. The main output from the workshop is a report which can be shared with partners, attendees, and the angling press via various articles, blogs, and newsletters. So part one, there'll be a series of questions. There'll be 3 questions in part one and 1 question in part two. So the first question will be, what information is being collected about bass by who and where? And we want you to think as wide as possible. You know, any information that you think might have a bearing on how the bass fishery fishery is managed, and where anglers can have an input, you know, please tell us about it. So we're thinking examples might be bass catches by anglers, and that can be catches that maybe are captured in part of some sort of a scheme, or it can be your own personal fishing stories. So in question 1, which is over there, you'll see there's a couple of maps on the wall, and on the first side of it is where we want you to share any fishing stories. So that can be things like, you know, have you caught fish in an unusual place? Have your catches suddenly gone down? Have the fish you're catching suddenly got smaller? Or are you catching in very unusual areas like freshwater, for instance? So we want to capture those, and at the same time, if there are any schemes going, so here we're interested in types of information. This question, we're interested in the types of information, not necessarily about the schemes. That we do that more in question 2. So the other sorts of types of information we would be interested in would be things like juvenile fish surveys, spawning condition. So are the fish, are they ripe? Are they running? Are they spent? That sort of thing. Post-release survival, as Kieran was saying, there's only one paper that's based on fish in captivity, looking at how fish survive when they're released. So can we do more on that? Is there more happening on that? Scale sampling, that's an area where we keep our own inventory of, we've got about 2,500 scales now in bass, and we use that partly to age the fish, so we can get an idea of what the age or distribution of the fish is in any year. But it's also a very good resource for research. And Tom, for instance, used some of our scales in his work. Image analysis, BAS is currently working with Plymouth University on fin vision, where they're taking underwater images of fish, of juvenile fish, to work out how they're using the estuary systems. And that's another area that we might pick up on. And also participation levels. So how active are we in our fishing, and what are the socioeconomic values of fishing? So anything like that, if you can put them down, we'd be glad to hear them. So part 2, what methods, techniques are being used for recording, catches, sampling, and other data. So that's more about what actual schemes are taking place and whether they're working or not, or how they could be improved. And then question 3 is about what are the issues and barriers around data collection and monitoring. And that's quite an important one, because I think if lots of people ask me, as anglers ask me, how can I get involved in research? And one of the things that holds them back is kind of some of these barriers that we've got to try and get round. So I'm thinking about things like, is there any legal reason why they can't get involved? I mean, are they allowed to tag fish, for instance? Is there anything about anglers are worried about fish welfare? So because catch and release is much more prominent these days, and anglers don't like generally killing fish. So are there any issues there that might prevent our involvement? Are there any issues about trust? So are anglers going to worry about what data they provide being used against them, or sharing all their marks? And if they're going to go to this effort, is that data going to be used to some good? Is it going to actually appear somewhere? Is it going to actually lead to change? So those are some of the things we need to think about and trying to overcome. And then finally, in part 2, after a break, we'll have another question. How could scientists and bass fishers work together to improve the evidence base? And that, for me, that's the main point of today, is some sort of collaboration, some sort of better collaboration, increased collaboration, or even formal collaboration between the two parties would be great. So, okay.